Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Ignite 2018 with Squared Up and our coffee break series. Can I get a roar? Come on. Woo! Woo! There we go. So in case you noticed, the audio is a bit different than normal. We are live from the expo floor hall. It's literally just open, so the crowds are streaming past us now.
Not that empty anymore.
Well, it's not that empty, no. We're now surrounded by people. So we've been to sessions, we've been talking to people, we've been at the keynote, so we thought we'd give you our sort of immediate take on what's been happening, what's the hot news is, and sort of our thoughts on the expo so far. As always, I'm joined by Richard Benwell.
Good morning, everyone.
And a whole host of people. So, as always, folks, ask us questions in the chat. Let us know if the audio is a bit wonky or if we need to speak up so you can hear us, and that'd be great. But with that, let's kick off with the keynote. So, Monday morning, there was the keynote, Satya sort of unveiling the big vision of Microsoft, and one of the key points that we pulled out...
Well, he stole my pitch, actually, didn't he, Matthew?
Yeah, essentially.
Sort of, talking about siloed data and then the need to create one view across all of that.
So Richard stood up and pointed this out, and Satya maybe wasn't so thrilled about that.
Didn't like the heckle.
No, I don't think so. But more realistically, that was the sort of the grand vision, but down in the real world, in the trenches, people are asking us about SCOM. And I just want to sort of highlight that actually SCOM is really popular here. There's been several sessions, which we've been to. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of shots there, and Kevin Green posted a tweet with the second picture, so thanks Kevin for that one. And he said, for anyone who thinks System Center adoption is dead, check out this full attendance. Like all the sessions I've been to that have featured SCOM have been packed.
Oversubscribed.
Exactly. So people are still really interested in this one. That first session is from first picture, on the left is from a session about adoption of Azure Alerts and migrating from SCOM to Azure. And the speaker asked who here is actually moving to Azure Alerts, and like one person put their hand up. So people have SCOM, they're very happy with SCOM, they want to keep using it. And this is something that was actually raised in the System Center session itself, was the fact that customers, so you guys have voted SCOM as a sort of a customer's choice highlight for Gartner. So they have awarded it in 2018 the Customer's Choice Award for Application Performance Monitoring Suites. Now, SCOM does have some APM capabilities. We think this is probably more a suite level award, but it still again reflects the fact that people are happy and using and engaged with the existing Microsoft tooling that's in place. So if you're there wondering, like, oh, everyone's saying that SCOM is dead, that's naysaying, it's still alive and it's still kicking. I'm also happy to report that after going to the What's New in System Center session, that they are continuing to make investments in this area. So Microsoft has had this sort of idea of a long-term servicing channel and a semi-annual channel. They have said that they are going to release in Q1 System Center 2019, both as a long-term servicing release and a semi-annual release. And what that means for you guys is that SCOM is supported now minimum for 10 years, because that's what the long-term servicing channel supports. Yep. So you will get full mainstream support for 5 years and extended support for another 5 years after that.
And that's the very least, because hopefully there'll be another
absolutely. It certainly looks that way. So SCOM is supported for 10 more years. The product group, so forget Microsoft, the product group strategy is to complement on-premise tools with Azure capabilities. So that's what they're focused on doing here, is like, let's integrate wherever we can with Azure, but otherwise just look to complement and make sure that your on-premise tools still work for on-premise, which is a great message there. They talked about Windows Admin Center a bit, so we've talked about that previously on the coffee break, but just to reiterate there, the product group really views that as a thing that they're positioning for sort of small environment management or for cluster management tools. So the idea here is, you're a small, medium business, you're going to use this for either some specialist workloads or you're going to use it just to manage your estate, and you've got a couple of hundred boxes and it's fine to sort of log onto those. For anything at scale, System Center remains the focus. So if you've got thousands of machines in multiple data centers, this is the tool that they're making sure they maintain, that you can actually use that. So that's the kind of workloads they're focused on, which means that's the features they're going to look to push and improve in future releases. So they've said and announced they're going to have a System Center 19.0x release in Q1 and Q3 2019. So there are at least 2 more semi-annual channel releases planned. It's 19.0x because I think they haven't quite decided yet when it's going to land. So that could follow 18.01 and be March 31st. I'm not entirely sure. But they've also said that they're looking to still continue improving 2016, and there will be an update roll-up for that in Q2. It's mostly bug fixes, but if you are not looking at upgrading in the next 6 months or a year, you're staying on 2016, there are still bug fixes and engineering going on. So they're working on 3 different versions of System Center, which is quite an engineering, a bit of effort.
All right, so come on, Matthew, what is new in 2019?
Okay, so, internet is suddenly masking your voice is great. So, yeah. The session was mostly focused on improvements since 2016 because not everyone's actually moved to that yet. So the big sort of initial announcement was that they are now supporting monitoring Windows Server 2019 and the latest versions of Linux distributions. Whoa. Audio's completely dropped.
The network.
Yeah, I'll keep recording, it's got the recording. So, they are updated to the most recent agents. Okay, that's nice, but that's kind of what you'd expect from a big release. The big other change they've made now is they've made a big enhancement and investment in notification subscriptions and alerting. So the idea here is, previously the SCOM alerting was notifications and alerting you get in your mailbox was kind of limited and it had some sort of big pain points. Now they've extended the criteria builder, so you can now build notification subscriptions that include all or exclude operators. So you can now say, send this alert to someone as long as it doesn't have this particular string in there or something like that. So it enables you to build up much more granular subscriptions, which is great, so it reduces the noise, which has been a big problem.
What I really like about this is it's a real fundamental of SCOM.
Oh yeah.
Email alerting.
Yeah.
It doesn't get more fundamental than that, and they are investing in those fundamentals, which is great to see.
Yep, absolutely. They've also now included rich HTML notifications out of the box. So this is the thing that we talked about in the very first coffee break, funnily enough. You can always enable it via the SDK or script. It's now turned on by default, and they've also included a default HTML template there as well. Those kind of similar to the ones that we've done in the past. So it has the email has a big bar that colorizes at the top depending on whether the alert's warning or critical. It includes links in there so you can go and view the alert in the web console or the monitor or alert that raised it, and also the details of the object that created it as well. So very interactive, you can immediately jump out and get what you want. And there's also a preview button, so if you want to customize it and change it, you can actually put your HTML in there, hit a preview button, and you'll see what it looks like live. So you don't have that embarrassing problem, where you change the template and it goes out to people and they can't read it because you made a mistake in it. So that's pretty cool. And they've also looked at a really long-term bugbear, which is closing alerts if the monitor is still unhealthy. So a big problem that everyone's had is an alert gets raised, someone fixes it, closes the alert, of course the monitor is still saying there's a problem there, it sits in a red state now forever, and you basically have this object that's failing all your SLAs because you can't see that it's actually gone red and the alert never gets re-raised. So what they've said now is that alerts in the web console at least, they didn't actually clarify whether it's in the ops console as well, but at least in the web console, if you try and close an alert that's linked to a monitor and the monitor is still currently showing as unhealthy, it prevents you from doing that. The error message comes up and says, no, I can't put it in that resolution state. So now you're being forced to reset the monitor instead or wait for the thing to go red. So again, like Richard said, this is a fundamental thing in SCOM. It's been a long time coming, so it's good that they're finally addressing this sort of thing. The workflow could be a bit better maybe because it does let you just reset the monitor then, which invariably means if it's not a problem, the alert will reopen, which could be a pain if you've got like integrations ticketing solutions, so now you get a brand new alert. But this is definitely a good step forward in this particular area. And then sort of the other big improvement is on cross-platform. So there's some big long-term bugbears that I know Christian from NICE has been talking to us about that have been a problem in the past. The big one is during agent failovers, what happens now is, what happened previously, is that when an alert failed over, all alerts that were currently outstanding for that object, when it failed over to a new management server because the first one went unavailable, got raised again.
Right.
So duplicating all your existing alerts all over again. So they've now fixed that no longer happens, which is brilliant. They have introduced update recommendations for Unix, Linux MPs, and they've also updated a host of the MPs as well, so Tomcat, WebSphere, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So now you should now get recommendations for management packs they have for your Unix Linux offerings, and you should be prompted to update them as well, which is cool. And they've also made some further Linux log file monitoring improvements. They didn't really go into this in too much detail, but the thing they did say was that they've also enabled you to create custom data sources for this now. So even if it's not a log file, the example they gave was taking like CPU information from Docker containers, you can now surface that via the Linux agent back into SCOM. So I don't know how hard it will be to write those custom data sources. They didn't really talk about that at all, but that could be a really, really big win if you've got a lot of cross-platform machines and you're looking to monitor those in a more advanced way than just CPU and memory in the future. They also had a few other sort of odds and sods, which are a bit less core, but will still be cool to some people. So the first one is the Azure MP has now been enhanced. It's supposed to be much, much faster and much easier to use, which is cool. The service map integration sort of is plugged again. I think there's a new feature there as well where SCOM health can now be bubbled up into service maps. So if your objects are showing as healthy or unhealthy in SCOM, you can actually visualize that from your network maps in service maps. They've added full support for SQL 2017. So previously you had to install it on a SQL 2016 box and then upgrade that box to 2017 to get 2017 support. That's now native. And they've also made some APM improvements as well. So if you're using the APM feature, it will now support the client-side monitoring piece on Edge and Chrome and support monitoring SharePoint 2016, which is pretty cool as well. And they also wanted to stress that everything from SCOM 1801 and 1807 is also included. So if you're on 2016, which a large number of the audience seem to be still, you've got all the things we previously talked about. So I'd recommend going and watching our webinars on those as well to get the full scoop. There's a lot there if you're coming in from 2012 or 2016 to look to, which is pretty cool. And I'll sort of just cover over the rest of it. SCOM isn't the only product that they're actually looking at doing, and they're also making investments in the whole suite as well. So Virtual Machine Manager had a lot of improvements to do with like fabric health reporting, so looking at the underlying networking and storage. Some RBAC improvements there around making it easy to actually delegate administration, some storage optimizations, upgrades of storage spaces direct, and they're also looking at further ways of integrating the Azure management, your stories you're seeing into VMM. So right now, from Azure, you can do update management and backup and site recovery and things like that. They want to make that integrate with VMM so that you can use those stories and VMM with the driver for that, which is pretty cool. Data Protection Manager has had some updates and improvements as well. So they're looking at doing some backup and reliability improvements. If you are backing up, it should work more often. And also they're looking at opportunities to back up into Azure as well. Config Manager, they didn't really talk about because that had its own dedicated session, which means there's a lot there. But they've said they will continue to Config Manager will continue to receive updates every three times a year. So a significant investment in Config Manager. It's always been a huge part of the suite as well, so no surprises there. Orchestrator, for those of you who are using Orchestrator, two massive bugbears of that have finally been fixed, which is the thing is finally x64 native, which is great, so no more messing around with like dealing with binaries or executables or modules that aren't x64 native and having to do remoting. And also it supports PowerShell 4 and later, which again is a massive win because everything now is being automated via PowerShell, so it takes a lot of the pain of creating runbooks away now that those two features are actually in. So yeah, if you're using that, that's a big piece. And finally, Service Manager is also getting a couple of updates. The big one is like UI responsiveness, which is the main problem with Service Managers. That's great that they're tackling that issue because it's really slow. And they're also looking at making some AD connector improvements so the thing will scale better in larger environments. So, across the stack, they are making big changes, and this is just what's coming at the first side of the year because all of these products are getting semi-annual channel releases. So, talking about the various different things that's coming, the big thing that's left now, other than obviously waiting for the release in Q1 next year, is choosing which channel you want to be part of. So there's two models. There's the long-term servicing channel, which receives that's got your 10-year support on it, but it only receives updates on a slow cycle, typically as new releases or like big service packs. So like the last long-term servicing release was 2016 itself. So that's a 3-year cycle till you get the new features and new updates. The semi-annual channel receives updates twice a year, but each release is only supported for 18 months, but you have to move on to the next version. So case in point, if you're on 1801 right now, by July 2019, you will have had to upgrade it or you'll be out of support. And what that means now is that you have to choose which channel you want to move forward with because they only support going from long-term servicing to semi-annual. There's no way back. So once you get on this 18-month train, you're on it forever.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of a thing to be aware of. So if you're on 2016 right now, you have two choices. Do you want to go to 2019 long-term servicing, or do you want to go onto the 190X sort of semi-annual release when it comes out? For those of you who are on 1801 or 1807, unless you want to rebuild, your only choice is to go onto 190X when it comes out. And they did say as well in the session that they'll have parity. So 2019 LTSC and 190X, the semi-annual release, will be basically the same version, bar some like last-minute bug fixes that come in that get put in semi-annual. So really the choice for you is just down to how often do you want to receive updates and where you want to go from here. I mean, because, to be honest, because both of them have the same features, if you're currently on LTSC, there's really no harm in going to the LTSC version because at any point in the future you can switch onto semi-annual channel.
And that's for in-place upgrades.
Right.
Because actually what we do find is a lot of customers do rebuild management groups side by side and then transition over. So I guess if you're up for that, you can always sort of switch across in the future. Not necessarily kind of locked in if you're prepared to do that.
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Okay, so that was all the SCOM stuff. That's the session I was in. Funnily enough, next door,
at the same time,
great schedule planning there. Richard was in the Azure Monitor session.
Yeah,
so Richard, tell me all about it.
You have to choose SCOM or Azure Monitor. It's like, where are you? Are you with SCOM or are you with Azure Monitor? And I guess actually referring to your slide, Matthew, with the picture, it's probably the same size room. I think Azure Monitor was probably about sort of half full, a third full, hard to say. But so it's Shiva. Pretty sure that's a misspelling, but sort of Shiva and Evgeny were sort of presenting on this. Shiva sort of asked who had Azure Monitor, who's playing with Azure Monitor, I guess, and everyone put their hand up, so at least everyone who was there was in the right place. But it was, sort of well attended, but not as much as SCOM from that picture that I saw. So essentially they covered Azure Monitor end to end. There's slides, and they sort of put lots of slides up around what Azure Monitor is, but I always think just putting up the UI explains it much better than Microsoft's official slide. So here's the UI, and I'll come to that in a second. Before I get into that, it's very clear that you won't be hearing much about OMS anymore.
No.
There was even some sort of reference to it about the sort of unsaid previous solution that they had, but I think that is dead.
So OMS is literally just a SKU you buy now. It's not a product.
Well, actually, I think even I just saw something online where it was just clarifying the sort of rebranding. It said, the OMS brand is now, sort of deprecated.
Oh wow!
I'm not sure about the licensing. That's way beyond my powers of understanding. Is Microsoft licensing? But it's certainly sort of from a branding point of view, you won't be hearing anything more about OMS. But really, the nub of it is that everything around Azure monitoring is now going to fall under this concept of Azure Monitor. You can see that in the right-hand side there, and they're also sort of stripping down some of the naming of this stuff to sound much more fundamental, right? So it's like literally like in the Azure portal is Monitor, right? So everything will fall under that sort of Monitor workspace. And then actually, I think what's really nice about this is that they are pulling it all together. They're really sort of unifying it and looking at the sort of fundamental capabilities of monitoring. And actually, I quite like this. They're sort of distilling it down to saying, look, alerting is a fundamental capability. And to be honest, I think Azure monitoring alerting is still very sort of immature, right? It works, of course, but I mean, actually to scale alerting across all of your resources is a tough job. It has none of the sophistication of SCOM alerting right now in terms of either tuning those alerts or routing those alerts. But what they are doing is driving to make sure there is only one Azure alerting place, and that's under Monitor.
Not 15 different things.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
Metrics the same. So performance metrics, whether it's from what used to be called sort of Azure Monitor or any company new now, will end up in one place. So fundamentally, there's one place now where you see metrics. Actually, when they clicked on that, it was a little bit like sort of a reporting pane where you could basically search for any metric across your entire Azure subscription, and then sort of add that onto a graph and draw that. And so it's kind of quite nice, almost like sort of searching the data warehouse, right? And pulling out metrics from the data warehouse. And logs is what we're all familiar with. I'll talk about that in a second, which was the Azure Log Analytics, which was OMS. Don't mention it.
God.
Again, that's the last time I mentioned OMS. And that sort of Log Analytics is now called logs. They're the core capabilities. And then they've introduced this concept of insights. So just Matthew, before that there. So this is where we were familiar with application insights before, and so on. So that's now under this sort of catch-all of insights. You've got these sort of fundamentals and now these insights. So app insights, I think most of us are familiar with sort of APM-like functionality. The virtual machines is really interesting. What they mean by virtual machines there is server monitoring. So if you are from a SCOM background and you think server monitoring, that's essentially server monitoring up in Azure now is virtual machines. And there's a little bit about that in a second. But so under that panel there is everything you'd want to do from an infrastructure as a service monitoring point of view.
So guest and host level metrics, that kind of thing.
And of course they've got containers, networks, and that's where essentially it's the more sort of advanced, interesting use cases and scenarios and functionalities. So you've got those fundamentals, and then you've got the real whizzy new sort of capabilities in terms of monitoring.
So they are looking at really addressing like your classic sort of old school like compute, like VMs, and also looking at addressing all the sort of new management of like functions.
Yes, but there's a caveat to that under the next bullet point here, which is what wasn't said in the session, and actually nothing was said about on-prem. And I've had a discussion with the Microsoft product team around this, and these capabilities I think will be capable of monitoring on-prem, but it's not what their focus is.
Right.
When they're talking about Azure monitoring being the solution for cloud monitoring, they really mean Azure monitoring, right? They're building all of these capabilities to create the best and a single offering around monitoring Azure. It's not their goal to make capabilities that can monitor Azure and on-prem.
So that's quite a departure then from some of the other management pieces you've seen.
I'm going to mention OMS again. When the OMS brand was around, that's where the confusion was, right? So it's a replacement for SCOM or not? And I think now the story I'm hearing is much clearer.
Yeah.
Right. SCOM is sort of here to stay. SCOM is your on-prem monitoring solution for your on-prem sort of resources. If you want to monitor the cloud, Azure Monitor is going to be that. And of course, then the question is like, still, how do you blend those capabilities? You know, how much? Of course, SCOM can monitor a little bit of Azure. Azure can monitor, I'm sure, a little bit of on-prem. But of course, you still need one view across those, which is where we come in, hopefully, in the future.
The weird thing with that is, of course, that all the other capabilities for Azure management, like backup and update management and things like that, they're all saying now you can use Azure to manage both. So it's funny with Monitor they've decided to say, actually, no, it really is just that one piece.
I just say, I mean, that's what I was hearing. That's what I sort of heard them say, and I think that will come through in their sort of strategy and their messaging now.
Cool, excellent. So that was the that's kind of
overview. Yeah. Just get a couple of key ones I wanted to highlight then in terms of some of the demos. Was this one. So this is under the
SCOM console, right?
Exactly. So this is under the VM Insights. You see it just in the breadcrumb right at the top of that screenshot. You've got some virtual machines. So if you drill down into that virtual machine insights solution, you get this, which is Health Diagnostics, and it looks a lot like something we're all familiar with.
It's the Health Explorer,
it's the Health Explorer, right? And actually it is. It's been delivered, I think, from the sort of SCOM team, or from sort of resources and some leadership from the SCOM team. So essentially they've ported over the idea of health state now into Azure Monitor. And this has been a big thing because people who have been familiar with SCOM, but have been working with the Azure monitoring capabilities, have missed health state. Right, you've got alerts, you've got metrics, you've got logs, but hey, is this thing red or green right now?
It's all bags of point-in-time events, isn't it?
So this is porting over the concept of health state. As you can see from the screenshot, at the moment it's just covering the operating system. So what you've got is sort of Windows and disks and the network there. I'm not sure what their plans are, to be honest, about whether they're going to be sort of porting over deeper sort of tech stack sort of insights, so actually looking at the components running on those VMs. But certainly you can see from this where they've got their influence from, and you can probably guess where we'd be going from this.
Do you think it's fair to say that perhaps they don't plan to actually bring that sort of component level insight in, because the idea is that you use, like in this sort of new cloud first world of building all your apps like DevOps style, you're going to integrate with app insights or log analytics in a deeper sort of fashion, like ingest your own events, monitor it using those tools. So like rather than SCOM, where SCOM monitored the infrastructure and also the app, the idea is now you have these two sort of different features monitoring it from the same sort of location in the portal. Do you think maybe that's the strategy there?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, obviously, if you're going sort of platform as a service, I think App Insights is more geared towards your sort of platform as a service. So websites, right? Azure websites, maybe an Azure SQL backend. And App Insights can do that really, really well. This is obviously targeted more towards just your sort of infrastructure as a service, right? You've sort of shifted your VMs over to Azure. Big question is if you've shifted over a VM onto Azure and it's running SQL, are you going to get the level of SQL monitoring that SCOM would provide, or do you put a SCOM agent on this, and do they interact at any point? Basically, is a big question. So, I mean, I was looking at some of these demos thinking, wow, when you start just talking about monitoring, there's just so much to cover, and really the SCOM is the culmination of all of those sort of aspects, and they're kind of rebuilding all of that in Azure, and it's going to be fantastic to see where it goes, but it's a lot of work to go. The other thing I wanted to highlight then is log analytics, right? So now just logs.
They're paring it down all the time.
So again, this sort of reflects the sort of the fundamental kind of nature of this, right? This is just Azure logs, right? And Shiva actually sort of really emphasised that, right? So the logs is underpinning all of the raw data in Azure Monitor, right? It's essentially the data store for everything that Azure Monitor has is logs. They have said that it's a real fundamental capability, and actually Azure Data Explorer, which was announced in the technical keynote
at the end,
in the tech keynote, they sort of launched this new feature, which is Azure Data Explorer, and essentially that allows you to interrogate this log data. You've probably all seen it before. It's called Custo, and that was based on App Insights before. But essentially, they've taken this sort of data store, taken this query language, and built that into the sort of fundamentals of Azure. And Azure Data Explorer then will be your query interface into that.
It's quite impressive actually, the demos in the keynote. I don't know if you watched, if you haven't, go back and have a look, because they ingested like 1 billion rows or something, and then just had a query immediately that counted the whole lot and executed in a few seconds.
It is impressive.
So it's really cool technology, and it's clear they're building it all in.
And I mean, I was sitting there thinking, this is very exciting, and as you say, like, that's a very exciting demo, and I was like, but aren't they really just saying it's a bit like how SCOM is backed by a SQL database? I mean, it sounds trendy, but I mean, it's kind of, I think, analogous to SCOM being backed by a SQL database, and you can query all of that data by using a tool called SQL Server Management Studio. And I think it's, it is exciting. It does feel sort of very much more like the future, and they are building this from the ground up, right? So instead of a SQL database backed tool, they've now got a log database backed tool, so it's actually a NoSQL database, and then their KQL or whatever it's called,
yeah, I think
query
it's
language, right?
Going for.
Is the replacement for SQL. And actually, again, that was emphasised, right? So this logs capability is a foundational piece. I quite like that phrase, foundational piece. And the point there was that to get out of Azure Monitor, everything you can do, you're going to have to learn that query language to some extent, at least basic queries, right? Because in the Azure portal, they've got all these capabilities, but if you now want to query something specific, generate a report, get some insight that Microsoft aren't providing kind of out of the box in the UI, you're going to have to drop down to this level. And again, it is analogous to dropping down to SQL and saying, okay, great, I'm going to look at my SCOM alerts, over a certain time period or something. But they do really want people to kind of pick this up. I guess a bit like PowerShell is sort of a fundamental for Windows admin.
I think that's really the shift that we've seen in Microsoft now, maybe in the last sort of 5 years or so, is they've gone far more from, we will provide all the out-of-the-box capabilities for you, and if you want to do anything advanced, you can't. That with PowerShell, with like KQL, and with all the sort of DevOps stuff they're doing now, the sort of message now seems to be, we'll give you the tooling you need to query what you need, but the out-of-the-box capabilities are going to lag way behind. So yeah, like you're saying, if you want to get it to grips with this stuff, it's not a case of we'll have like a fancy UI builder for you anymore. It's no, you've got to learn the language and sort of look through your data, and you find what you are interested in, and sort of ignore the rest. Which is a sort of a fundamental shift in how a lot of people do IT. So you definitely like get to grips with this sort of stuff, like learn PowerShell, learn KQL, because that's going to be your sort of management tool actually now, really, for quite some time to come.
Yeah. I just sort of wanted to summarise again, just on that last slide. You've got it there. The fact that Azure Monitor is being pitched as this single cloud monitoring offering from Microsoft, right? Azure Monitor, one experience for the alerts, metrics, and the logs. That's paraphrasing essentially like what they said. It is the monitoring tool for Azure, but it's not necessarily going to be a monitoring tool full stop. And so I think the message is clear. You've still got to continue investing in SCOM for as long as you have data centers, right, with servers that need to be and applications that need to be monitored. If you are also then moving into Azure, you will be picking up Azure Monitor, and it will be a comprehensive solution for monitoring up in Azure as well. I think I put up the roadmap slide there. Nothing actually too exciting, but obviously they've got a lot to do there, and there'll be a lot of momentum. And where we will be as a business that's squared up, will be offering that view across both fundamentally, because they're not suggesting that Azure Monitor is going to be the place where you do everything, right? They are saying you're going to have SCOM, you're going to have Azure Monitor, and we're positioning ourselves to be that one view across the both. Yeah,
which is important when you get to the point where, when you get to like 50% Azure or 50% data center, 49% Azure as time goes on, how do you jump the gap? Having a tool that can straddle both is really key. Cool.
Great.
So I hope you enjoyed the session. I'm aware that we've had some audio issues. Unfortunately, we're on the conference Wi-Fi, and since everyone has 5 phones, 3 Apple Watches, and a laptop.
It was actually when everyone flooded into the expo hall. That's when the network went down.
So for those of you asking, we have recorded this
without the glitches.
Without the glitches, yes. So you'll be able to hear a clean audio stream later on. So the recording will go out tomorrow as normal. So thank you for joining us live on the coffee break. As always, we are very community focused, and we want to hear from you. So if you want us to cover something on these coffee breaks or focus on something as a company, please go to community.squareup.com, use our community answers platform, raise questions there, get insights from your peers in the industry, get insights from us as well. And we look for the the community answers questions all the time for topics that we can raise in the coffee break. So definitely.
And actually at 11:30 today, Matthew, we have a session here exclusive to Ignite attendees where we're announcing a brand new community solution for Squared Up.
New, interesting, exciting things. So if you are currently watching this but not here, come along. As always, you can sign up for future sessions on our Coffee Break microsite at coffee-break-series at squareup.com. There's a form there, put your details in, and we'll email you a reminder all the time to let you know when the sessions are happening. And please do share that with a friend or a colleague if you think they'd be interested in this stuff as well. Boost the visibility of SCOM and of the community. The recordings and slides published via our blog, squareup.com/blog, along with a wealth of other great content. So make sure you check that out, especially if you've had listening to this and trying to break through the audio issues. So look at that tomorrow. And we have a YouTube playlist for all of our previous coffee breaks, covering a huge wealth of content. Just a little reminder, we've now released Squared Up v4, so some of those coffee breaks are now a little bit old or only apply to version 3, so just bear that in mind when you're watching things. We need to go through and sort of tag stuff as being v3 specifically, but the majority of that content is still applicable even today. So I highly recommend, if this is your first coffee break, go and check that stuff out there. There's a wealth of good content, not just in Squared Up, but also SCOM and enterprise monitoring in general. So with that, I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. Thank you guys for coming in person as well. well.
Hey.
And join us all next month for our next coffee break. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.